guys, I'm D-Mac from NBA Fantasy Bible, and along with me is my co-host Kayla Fonte, and we are Between Two Hoops. Kayla, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing really well. It's been a massive week in the NBA and been a massive week in your life as well in terms of fantasy.
Yeah, last week I was on Josh Lloyd's live mailbag show, which was just crazy. Josh, if you're watching this, we would love to have you on our show sometime. And you were
Oh,
pretty
yes.
busy too with Kingy.
Yes, I was on Kingy's show, Balls Deep. That was a lot of fun. You were on Kingy's show too.
I was, yeah, I think a week before. It
Yeah,
was
that was a
awesome.
lot of fun. And he was on our show last time around. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's been, a week and a half since we've been on. I've been overseas as well, overseas trip. Didn't end as well as I would have liked with a bit of COVID, but that's all right. We have recovered. I think I'm pretty well recovered, but shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Starting with our hot performers and sell highs. Starting with Jimmy Butler. So in the last 7 days, he's been the 16th nine-cap player. Quite remarkable for someone who's just come back. But yeah, he's looking like the Jimmy of old. Even in points, he's looked quite spectacular. Kayla.
Yeah, overall, he's just looked a lot better. And this is the perfect moment. This is what we've been waiting for to sell a high on him. If you still have those concerns about his injury or his consistency. But we've even talked about this before where he starts to heat up in the latter part of the season. And this is just what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, playoff Jimmy come to a fore. But look at those numbers. You're looking at the Jimmy of old. It's been a concern that his steal rate hasn't been there this year. And across the season, it's 1.1, but in the last week, it's been 2.0. So that's the Jimmy of old. That's what we know. Plus his efficiency in terms of his shooting, field goal percentage of 66.7%. That's around, what we're used to as well. Efficient Jimmy. But yeah, like you said, could be a great sell high opportunity just because of his penchant for sitting games.
Mm.
Jaren Jackson Jr. now quite similar. So in a way that we know what Memphis is going through at the moment. A lot of their guys are injured. They're not contending this season. They won't be making playoffs or play-ins for that matter. So they're going to run a lot of quite different combinations and lineups down the stretch. Jaren Jackson Jr. has performed really well in the last week.
Yeah, and he's really just the only star that's left on this team right now. And he's been forced to take on a greater load offensively, which is why we're seeing those offensive numbers increase. And that's part of why we're seeing a little bit of a dip in those defensive numbers. Nothing really to be concerned about. He's overall doing a lot better than he was before.
Yeah, just look at that usage rate down the bottom there, 36.4%. That's huge, but there's not that many options left on the Grizzlies team right now. So, of course, he's taken on that offensive load, as you were saying, but I think it's a great sell high opportunity. You'd really want to be taking pretty much anything in the top 50 if you can get there. You may even perhaps even consider something in the top 70 because you just know that down the stretch that he's going to be sitting a lot of games. They're going to look after him. He's very important to what they need to do next season once all the guys are back. So I would be looking to sell high as quickly as possible. Next guy, very similar boat, but Jeremy Grant. He's been on an absolute tear in the last 7 days. And that's been a bit of a combination of just great shooting, but also a lot of injuries as well.
Yeah, exactly. Injuries is the main reason why he's doing so well right now. But he's really capitalized off of that too. And that would be the perfect time to sell high on him while you can, while he's receiving those minutes. And we also don't know what's going to happen with him at the trade deadline. He could be someone that the Blazers potentially move.
Yeah, and if they don't move him, we've seen in the past couple of years, whether it be at the Trailblazers or even before that, the Pistons, he's sat the last several weeks of the season, which you would probably expect that to happen again if he was to stay in Portland. If he was to move, that could be a better situation for him. He may actually be taking on less usage, but he may actually then play out the rest of the season. But you just look at some of those numbers, field goal percentage of 51.9 compared to that on the season of 46.1. That's a dramatic increase as well. But those minutes are huge. Those points are huge. So, yeah, definite sell high. As we were saying, those injuries, you've got Shaden Sharp sitting out. He's injured for a while. Scoot Henderson, he had a nasal issue. Even Anthony Simon sat out a game as well. So he's taking on more offensive load. So I think it's time to ship him out if possible. Brandon Miller, again, another situation where he's taking full advantage of some injuries on the team over in Charlotte. But just look at those numbers. It's practically all greens in the last 7 days. So that's improvement on his season numbers. But he's been the 24th ranked 9-cap player and the 45th ranked points league player. But he's been really good in the last 7 days.
Yeah, like you said, part of that is due to injuries too. And it's funny because he was looking like a drop a few weeks ago, and he was giving you those inconsistent performances. He was also dealing with his own injuries at the time, but he's completely turned it around this week, and he's seen increases in production in literally every category.
Yeah, and you tend to see that with rookies as well. They come on later in the season, particularly those that not the big guys, but some of the smaller guys or the wings. They do come on a lot better down the back end of the season. But also, he's taken advantage of the fact that someone like Gordon Hayward is still out as well. Lamelo's been in and out of the lineup. He missed the last game, probably more precautionary on the back-to-back, but he's still taken advantage there. So yeah, a little bit of form in his rookie year, but also just taking advantage of some of those injuries. Next one, Jeremy Sohan. Wow. He has been the 23rd ranked 9-cap player, 73rd in points, so not as good, not as impressive as in category leagues, but I think he's a must roster player at the moment. What do you think?
I think so too. And look at that. There's not a single red stat on there. That's just crazy, especially from what we were seeing early on in the season. And a big reason for that too is just how he's being utilized in that starting lineup. We're finally starting to see him more in a power forward role compared to that point guard role, which is a big reason for that. And his stats may not be eye popping, but he gives you multi category value, which is why he's been so great.
Yeah, and his shooting efficiency is much improved. But yeah, moving away from that point guard role, giving that to Trey Jones, a traditional point guard, I think that was able to just allow him to get more touch, more feel for the game. And now he's moved back into power forward alongside a Wemby. He's looked really impressive. So I think he is a must-hold player. And we'll get into some questions later on in our mailbag segment. But yeah, there's some value there. Finally, Kevin Herter. You know that I'm not a big fan of Kevin Herter's. I don't think he's necessarily a must roster player for the rest of the season. But while he's hot, I think it's a great sell high opportunity.
Yeah, and we all know that he's a very streaky player. And right now he's going in through that hot stretch. It's only a matter of time before he goes cold. So now is the time to capitalize off of that and take advantage while you can.
Yeah, fourth in 9-cat in the last 7 days.
That's
That's
crazy.
crazy. That's absolute insanity. So absolute sell high moment. If you can get a top 100 guy for that, for him, you would do that immediately because that is unsustainable. But yeah, great week for him. Disappointments and buy lows, starting with Jason Tatum. This is not the first time we've had him in the segment, but overall, his season's been relatively disappointing, but he's had another disappointing week as well. 79th in 9-cat, 31st in points. Again, not as disappointing in points as it is compared to categories. And a lot of that's down to his efficiency. You look at the 39.1 field goal shooting. That's very disappointing for him. But also just across the board, he's down in terms of his shot production, his points per game, even his three-point shooting is well down on his season average.
Yeah, he's been a bit inconsistent lately. And we kind of talked about this before, where it's just a product of that stacked starting lineup, where every player on the Celtics kind of takes turns going through a little bit of a slump. But overall, their production has dipped a bit. Tatum is someone that I have on my team, and I could say that it's definitely been a little bit more disappointing this season, considering I took him with like my 5th overall pick. I don't think it's something that he's necessarily going to turn around and start giving you those amazing stats. He'll likely improve from what he is averaging right now. But like I said, it's just a product of that starting lineup.
Absolutely. Next one, SGA, the number one fantasy player typically, but he's been 49th in category leagues in the last 7 days. So normally it's very, very hard to execute a buy low on a top 5 player, but perhaps someone is a little bit frustrated that he's not giving you the offensive output that he normally does. He's not giving you the steals that he normally does. That's well down. So 1.0 steals in the last 7 days. That's across 4 games as well. So it's not the smallest of sample sizes, but four steals across 4 games is disappointing compared to what he's doing across the season.
Yeah, definitely. And even like you said, a lot of people are a little bit impatient when it comes to things like this. And I think it could be a solid buy low opportunity. I could see him turning it around next week, though, because they're facing a lot of crappy defensive teams. So it's nothing that people should really worry about.
No, absolutely. If you have him on your team, I don't think you need to worry too much about that. Now, his teammate has been quite disappointing, Chet Holmgren. The last 7 days, he's been outside the top 100 in category leagues and 82nd in points leagues.
Yeah, we're just not seeing that same crazy production that we're used to. And he's a rookie, right? Every rookie kind of goes through this slump. I similarly don't think that it's something that we should really worry about. I'm sure he'll find his footing again at some point of the season.
Yeah, his blocks have been maintained at 2.5 per game, which is great to see, but it's just his offensive output. So looking at his shooting numbers, 37.2 from the field compared to over 50% on the season. And that's translated into less points per game. So 11.8 across the 4 games in the last week as well. So yeah, that's just down. His 3-point numbers are down. Even his rebound rate is a little bit down as well over the last week. So I do think he is in a bit of a lull, and that could just be, I wouldn't say hitting rookie wall, but just a little bit of a lull in the last 7 days. So I do think it is a buy low opportunity. Kyrie, now, this last time we spoke about him, he was a sell high. He was the number 1 ranked fantasy player across the last 7 days. But in now the preceding last 7 days, he's been the 96th ranked 9-cat player. But you just look at his points ranks, points league ranks 24th. So it's pretty consistent across the season.
Yeah, so far not so bad in points leagues. He's not someone that I have, but just something I've noticed. I think they only had 2 games this past week too, because they did have one that was postponed. And then he also injured his hip in that last game against the Lakers. So that's also a reason why he probably wasn't feeling himself.
Yeah, and a lot of that, you just, again, looking down to shooting efficiency down at 38.6% compared to 47 on the season, but also that steal rate. No steals over the last week, which you usually rely on him for at least a steal a game. So 1.3 across the season. I don't think all of that's attributed to Luka coming back as well. So Luka had sat out a few games, and that forced Kyrie to take up a lot of that usage. And you see that usage rate still very, very high. And he was just unable to shoot the ball really well in the last 7 days. Again, we expect that to turn around. So buy low the Kyrie. Cat. Again, similar to Tatum, just a little bit of a disappointing season this year. I know he's still with his Twin Towers partner in Rudy Gobert, so his rebounds aren't going to be as high as they were in his at his peak a few seasons ago. But just in the last 7 days, he has been quite disappointing, even from a points league perspective.
Yeah, his usage rate is down too. A little bit concerning. I think it's about 4% there. His scoring output, defensive numbers, just not consistent right now. But this is also what we've kind of seen from him throughout the season too.
Yeah, it hasn't been dramatic across the board. It's just, slight decreases across several of those categories as well. So that does take a hit on your overall rank. And one of our favorites, Kobe White, just to finalize our buy lows. But I had to put in another column there. So across the season, his numbers have been okay when you compare the last 7 days across the season. But you want to compare it over the last 2 months. And that's when he's really ascended to more of a prominent role in that Bulls team, particularly as Zach LaVine's, not going to say taken a back seat, but he was injured for quite some time. He's injured again as well. And that's another reason why this is a great buy low opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. His stats did dip a bit when the Bulls were fully healthy again. But even in that last game without LaVine, he didn't have the production that we're used to seeing. But this is most likely something that he's going to turn around very soon. We all know what he's capable of.
Yeah, I think so. So definite buy low opportunity. All right, let's look at our ads for the next week. So the easy one is Marvin Bagley. And I say easy just because he's so heavily added at the moment. Bear in mind that Daniel Gafford's been out as well. He's in concussion protocol. He may come back very shortly. He may come back for today's game, actually. But I still think Marvin Bagley can carve out a bit of a nice role on that Washington Wizards team.
I think so too. He's more a reliable streamer for me when he is in that starting lineup, but we've seen his ability to give us points, rebounds, and even some value in some other categories as well.
And there's been a lot of talk that they may even split minutes between himself and Daniel Gafford once Gafford does come out of concussion protocol, which, in my opinion, Gafford is the superior center, but Gafford also struggles on staying on the court in terms of personal fouls. He does foul a lot, which does allow Bagley to come in and just soak up some of those minutes. So I still think he'll retain some value once Gafford does return. Talking about Memphis and all the injuries, Vince Williams, he's looked really impressive. And he's playing on the wing, but he's also a bit of a pseudo point guard as well. So he's racking up some nice assists, good shooting numbers as well, and some good steals. So I think he's a solid ad.
Yeah, he would be my number one. He's someone that I picked up, and so far he's been amazing. But at this point with the Grizzlies, I just want to pick up anybody with a pulse.
Yeah, pretty much. except for maybe Gigi Jackson. I may have,
Yes.
may have got too excited on Gigi, but you see that the potential's there. He is young. He's got to be inconsistent, but we'll talk about that next slide. But Luke Kennard is in a similar situation. Xavier Tillman to a lesser degree, but I think Kennard and Williams are your priorities from the Memphis Grizzlies, followed by Xavier Tillman. Tillman did miss yesterday's game. So he's got a little bit of soreness. I think it's knee soreness. Correct me if I'm
Mhm.
wrong, Kayla. It is knee
I believe
soreness.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that'll keep him out long term. So I would expect for him to return pretty quickly. So I would be adding Tillman as well if available.
Yeah, same with me. I know there are still a little bit of concerns over those consistency issues, which is something that we saw a little bit earlier on in the season. But if he's getting the minutes, he's worth considering for an ad.
Yeah, he's got the role. There's not many people that's going to take the minutes off of him at this
Mhm.
stage. Santi Aldama, they don't necessarily play exactly the same role, but Aldama's going to get some minutes as well. John Conchar will get some minutes, but I think Xavier Tillman is a solid ad. But of course, as we said, Kennard and Williams will be the number two priority. Moving along to Charlotte, Brandon Miller, we spoke about him. He had a really impressive last 7 days, so I still think he is an ad. Gordon Hayward is still out at the moment. LaMelo Ball should come back in the next game, but I think Miller's got a nice role on this team, so I'll be adding him. And Nick Richards, this is just maintaining Nick Richards just because Mark Williams, there's been a bit of an update on him.
Yeah, with Mark Williams, that's funny because a lot of people are saying now, should I just drop him at this point? And it's a really tricky question to answer right now, especially because we still have a significant amount of time left, even though we're in that latter half of the season. But for now, I would just say stream Richards. As long as he's in that role, he has value.
Absolutely. And someone else who has value is Jabari Walker. So he's quite the rebounding streamer, but I think he's more than a streamer. I think he's someone that will have rest of season value.
I have a feeling he will too, and he's been starting for Portland. He's been pretty promising so far. So we'll kind of just have to monitor that situation and see.
Yeah, DeAndre Ayton came back into the lineup in the last game, but Jabari Walker still maintained good minutes alongside of him. So I think that he is an ad, and I think he could be a nice rest of season play. Another person on the Trailblazers that I think is an ad is Malcolm Brogdon. He's looked really impressive. Again, we spoke about Jeremy Grant earlier, just taking advantage of some of the injuries to the team. Malcolm Brogdon's done the same. So Shaden Sharp is out for probably the next couple of weeks. You also had Anthony Simons did sit out the last game as well. Scoot Henderson did likewise. So Malcolm Brogdon's taking advantage of that situation.
Oh yeah, it's just a really depleted backcourt right now.
Yeah. And you didn't think that he would have much of a role just as a bit of a veteran presence, particularly just off the bench. And he was missing some games, so I think he must be added right now. But yeah, let's see how that plays out as well. And if some of the younger guys do come back in the next few games. Over to Orlando. Now, we've got a bit of a split at center. So we got Wendell Carter Jr. He's looking like the real ad here. Goga Badadze is still splitting minutes with him. In the last game, though, Wendell Carter Jr. outplayed Goga and actually had more playing time than Goga as well. So I think Wendell is the pickup at this stage. But with trade deadline looming and fast approaching, I think Goga is worth holding, perhaps as a mini stash, but someone who'll still provide you a little bit of output as well at the same time.
Yeah, I think so too. I've heard a lot of rumors that they're going to ship off Wendell somewhere. So Goga is definitely someone who I would hold on to. And it's funny because we were even talking about, I think, Wendell as a drop a few weeks ago, but he's really just turned it around since then. Overall, he's had a really underwhelming, injury-riddled season. So hopefully he can maintain this for as long as he can.
Absolutely. Similar situation at the Clippers. We heard Ivica Zubats will be out for quite some time. So that opens up the door for Mason Plumlee, but also for Daniel Tice. In the last game, Plumlee started and he played some solid minutes as well. They were meant to ease him back into it, but I think they really pumped the minutes into him. I think high 20 minutes as well. So I would expect that to continue as well. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if then they started playing Daniel Tice, and which would then open up the door for more Russell Westbrook as well. So I'll put them both in the same category, but just keep an eye on who's going to be the starter as well. But I would still prefer Plumlee over Tice at this stage.
Yeah, I would say the exact same thing. We kind of just have to wait and see who gets that starting role, because I think so far they kind of gone back and forth. But then again, it's only been 2 games so far, so things could still change.
Yeah, and for me, he's not a necessarily must roster, and he
Mm,
will kill your free throws in a category league as well. He's probably more suited to a points league, but
yep.
I still think he'll give you value with some of those rebounds, high field goal percentage, and the occasional block as well. Someone that we probably don't need to have on this list, but we've got anyway, is Jaden Ivey. He's been tremendous in the last couple of weeks. He's killed you in free throws if you're playing category leagues. And if you're not punting free throws, you know that he's killing you there. But the rest of his games look really impressive. And finally, they're playing him at point guard. It does help that Cade Cunningham is still sidelined as well. Having said that, Cade is due back any game now. So I still think that Jaden Ivey is an ad if he's available. And let's see how he looks alongside a Cade.
Yeah, I think Kate is supposed to return in about 5 days. That update was about 2 days ago. So yeah, Ivy is someone that I want to hold on to. I have a lot of hope for him. The Detroit Pistons are out of playoff contention, so hopefully that opens up a lot more minutes for their young guys.
Absolutely. Someone who's not as young but playing really well for Detroit is Alec Burks. Great points streamer, good threes, solid at the free throw line. I think he's playing really well and it could be added up into the point that Cade does return.
Yeah, definitely agree with that 100%.
Their teammate, Asar Thompson, now he was a bit of a fantasy darling to start the season. We were like, look at this guy, top 50 guy for the rest of the season. Then he fell off. Bojan Bogdanovic returned to the team. Isaiah Stewart took more precedent at power forward as well. Isaiah Stewart is now sidelined. I don't know for how long, but in the last game, Asar Thompson did get a lot more run at power forward. So hoping that continues moving forward. Let's see what happens once Stewart does return to the lineup. But for now, I'd be rostering him.
Yeah, 100%. And Thompson is someone I was really high on heading into the season too. So it's great to see him getting these minutes and that kind of opportunity again. We'll kind of have to monitor that situation, see how everything works out with the Pistons, but hopefully he could still carve out a solid role for himself because he's been rewarding us with that.
Yeah, he's looked really nice in the last few games as well. Kevin Herter, we spoke about him. He was the fourth ranked guy in 9-cat over the last week, which is just, again, crazy. So he needs to be added. And then once he goes cold, just drop him. But if you do have him, perhaps someone hasn't been keeping up with the rest of the season and just looks at his last few games going, wow, this guy is a fantasy stud. You may be able to sell high like we were saying, but it's unlikely. Just test the waters. You just never know. New York, Dante DiVincenzo, I think should have been already added, but if he's not, go and do so. Josh Hart. Now, he hasn't played great since the trade, since RJ Barrett did leave and Emmanuel quickly did leave. You thought there was a little bit more opportunity for someone like Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo. Josh Hart hasn't really done that, but I've got his name there just because yesterday Isaiah Hartenstein left the game early with some ankle soreness. So if the Knicks decide to play a little bit of small ball, I think there's an opportunity for Josh Hart to play a few more minutes there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The main concern has also been that inconsistency with his production and his minutes. So if he starts receiving a little bit more time on the court, he's someone that I would consider adding. He's not a priority ad for me, but someone that I will be monitoring with the Knicks' situation.
Yeah, let's monitor that situation. Not a must add, but just someone to monitor. Similarly, Precious Achiuwa, he came in with Hartenstein leaving the game early, put up some nice numbers. I just don't think he's a very good fantasy player. So I've got a big question mark next to him, literally and metaphorically. I've got a question mark next to Precious Achiuwa just because I don't think he's going to have that consistent role, and perhaps even Hartenstein does play next game. So just keep an eye out for that. Precious Achiuwa, people thought that when he got traded away from the Raptors that he'd get more opportunity, but it hasn't worked out that way. But perhaps this is the opening of the door for him.
Yeah, possibly. I'm not going to be rushing to go pick him up right now, and I think a lot of people are going to be like that too. We've even seen this with the Raptors, where not worth an ad, especially in that role that he had with Toronto. Now, though, he has a couple of minutes opening up for him potentially. I just don't think he's going to be a reliable fantasy performer.
Yeah, maybe one for deeper leagues. Now, Buddy Hield and Aaron Nesmith, Indiana, I think they've got some nice, solid roles at the Pacers. Ever since Pascal Siakam came in, Bruce Brown left as well, so he's gone to Toronto, and he's the next name on the list as well. I think that's just opened up the door for Buddy Hield and Aaron Nesmith. back to Buddy Hield, just keep in mind that Andrew Nembard is also on the sideline. So once he does come back, that may impact Buddy Hield's output as well. But for now, I think Buddy Hield is an ad. I think Aaron Neesmith does have a nice role, so I think he's a hold or an ad either way.
Yeah, I think so too. Hield is someone who I would prefer just because he's going through that hot stretch right now, but he is also someone that we have to watch out for with the trade deadline coming. He was mentioned in a lot of rumors, and we're still kind of unclear on what's going to happen with that situation.
Yeah, he may go to a worse spot. But yeah, let's wait and see, and we'll see how that all plays out. Same goes for Bruce Brown. So he's looked a little bit disappointing on your Raptors, but I still think the role is there. But also, there's some rumors that perhaps he may be on-traded. He may go to another team. And the rumor that I just read was the Knicks really want him. I think Dibs loves what he does. So we'll see how that plays out. But for now, he's a Raptor, and I think there is that role. And even though he has been disappointing, I think he should be an ad, or at least considered an ad in standard leagues.
Yeah, definitely considered. And yeah, like you said, it really depends what happens with that trade deadline. But I think until that point, he's going to be used more as a sixth man. He probably could draw some starts here and there, but it seems like that's the role that they want him to have going forward until they decide what to do.
Yeah, and he played that role really well with the Nuggets last season. Had some nice fantasy output as well at times, but sometimes consistency was a bit of a concern. So let's see how that all plays out. Trey Jones, we had him on our ads list quite some time ago. Ever since we heard he was going to be the starting point guard for the Spurs, we knew we had to rush and put him back on our rosters. So he's been really nice, very, very solid for the Spurs. And we spoke about Jeremy Sohan, and that's almost dependent of each other. So Jeremy Sohan's really flourished coming and playing more power forward now.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, like we mentioned before, is just that they're being utilized properly in that starting lineup. And when they're in their respective roles, that's when they play best. And that's what we're seeing right now. So as long as that continues, add them.
And it was great to see Spurs have a nice victory. Good comeback victory as well over the Wizards, I believe. Alex Caruso, I've got a typo there, Caruson, but it's Alex Caruso. I think he should already be added just for his defensive output, particularly in category leagues. I think from a points perspective, and you'll let us know, Kayla, but he's probably not as valuable in a points league.
Yeah, I would say that too. He's usually a guy who can give you about 20 to 25 fantasy points per night. As long as he's in that increased role where he's seeing more minutes, I think he's someone who you should consider adding, though.
And you mentioned it, increased role. Zach LaVine could be out for perhaps a week or two as well. So that just opens up more opportunity for Alex Caruso.
Exactly.
Good segue into Patrick Williams. Now, he hasn't been rosterable in the last few weeks, particularly since LaVine's come back to the team. But maybe this does open the door for him to get some more opportunity.
I think so. He was solid in his last game, if I remember correctly. For me, he's more of a monitor situation, kind of see what happens. But he was pretty promising last time when Zach LaVine was out. So I'm kind of expecting similar results, but I'm not going to get my hopes up.
Yep, I'm with you. Nice one for deep leagues and monitor for standard leagues. Cam Thomas, it was hard for me to put his name on here, but I think he's hot at the moment. So he can be rostered. Maybe he should be rostered. Maybe I just don't really like his game, and that's why I'm not rushing out to go and get him. He was a free agent. I could have picked him up in a couple of leagues today, and I just chose I did not want him on my roster. But a lot of people are adding him, and for good reason. He's been shooting really well, and he played extremely well in the last game as well.
Well, I think a lot of fantasy analysts are very critical of his game just because he's very, and we mentioned this before, one-dimensional in his game where he'll give you those points and he'll give you a couple threes here and there. But his production across the other categories are a little bit inconsistent and non-existent at times. I think he's more valuable in points leagues, though. What do you think?
I would agree with you. I was just going to say we could compare him to someone like an Alec Burks as well. So quite one-dimensional in their scoring output, but occasionally Cam Thomas is quite inefficient as well. So Burks probably has that over him just a little bit, but Thomas is getting the role. He's getting some good minutes. So let's see, and for his sake and for the sake of the Nets, let's see if he can continue that as well. His teammate, Dennis Smith Jr., he's on this list as well. Having said that, there is word that Ben Simmons may be ramping things up, and we've heard that before, so we won't get our hopes up too much. But Dennis Smith Jr. coming off the bench, he's playing some really solid minutes as well, and he's playing behind Spencer Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie has actually turned things around. He's looked quite good in the last week, but before that, he was looking lackadaisical. He was looking just like he didn't want to be there. But Dennis Smith
Mhm.
has just maintained some nice value recently. He's probably one for 14 teamers and deeper, but someone to consider, particularly for nice assists, nice steals if you are in a category league.
I usually don't really stream as many players from the Nets just because I feel like it's hard to find a reliable streamer unless you're going like short term, which Dennis Smith Jr. would be my number one pick. It's just harder to find that long term value.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So let's monitor that one. I don't think he's going to be a league winner come end of season, but someone to monitor and could be quite helpful. Gary Trent. Now, this is one that we've often had on our drops list, and a lot of people were over rostering him, and a lot of leagues were rostering him for no reason. But I've got him there as more of a speculative ad. I think there's a bit more of a role for him now since the trade went down. Perhaps there's some more trades to follow, but he's getting some nice consistent minutes. He's shooting the ball a little bit better as well. So just a speculative ad, I just for the role and for the minutes. We know that when he does get some nice minutes, we've seen it in previous years that he can be a top 60, top 70 type of player as well. So just one to keep an eye on, just a name to keep an eye on there, but not necessarily a must roster guy right now. But yeah, like I said, a speculative ad. And another one in that category is Cam Whitmore. He's playing really solid minutes and looking really good. Very impressive for the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for both those players, as long as they're receiving those minutes. There's someone who I would look to add. They're not, like you said, my priority pick, but possibly in a deeper league, someone who I would consider.
Yeah, in a dynasty format, I think Cam Whitmore's got a lot more value as well. I think it just, Houston looked great, and I can't really begrudge them for playing guys like Dylan Brooks because they're playing well. He's playing well. He's giving them an edge, but it would be really nice to see Cam Whitmore play 30 minutes. Tari Eason as well. He's been sidelined for quite some time. But these younger guys, I know they've got a plethora of young talent, but it would be nice to see Cam Whitmore get 30 minutes consistently.
Mhm.
Now, looking at some drops, TJ McConnell was my number one, but that's with Hallie coming back quite early from his injury. But Halliburton's actually questionable for today's game. So perhaps TJ McConnell can be a nice stream for today. But essentially, I think he's a drop. I don't think he needs to be rostered. And if you do miss the stream for today, if Hallie does happen to sit, I think that's okay because you'll be wanting to have someone that's got value leading into next week as well. But if you need some assists, if you need some steals, and it's confirmed that Halliburton does miss, perhaps he's one to stream in for today. But similarly, Jalen Smith, his teammate, and Obi Toppin, I think these guys are drops as well. Just with the trade, the role and the minutes don't happen to be there anymore.
Yeah, they were kind of just pushed back in the rotation, so there's no really use to holding on to them. And even when they were receiving those consistent minutes, they weren't even the best options.
They weren't the best. They were providing some nice value.
Yeah,
Toppin was
decent, but
really nice. Decent, but not must roster. And now that
yeah.
Pascal Siakam's there, I think, yeah, like you said, not necessarily must roster in a standard league, but one for deeper leagues. Yeah, keep an eye on that. Aussie Duop Reith, he's looked really nice, but now that DeAndre Ayton has returned, I think he's an easy drop. Mo Wagner, again, we've talked about the split at center. So that's Wendell Carter Jr., Goga Badadze. Mo Wagner's sometimes getting DMPs or sometimes playing very limited minutes. So he's a clear drop for me. Thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that too. He's just not receiving the minutes, and even when he was pretty solid when he was, but now that he's not, there's no use really holding on to him. Just keep an eye on him for any other injuries that occur for the Magic centers.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps with that trade deadline as well with Wendell Carter Jr. But yeah, it's something to keep an eye out for, but definitely a drop for this point of view. Andrew Wiggins, he's always on this list. He's your boy. He doesn't need to be rostered. He's been okay since he's gone back and starting, but I don't think he's a must roster.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Same goes for Harrison Barnes. Why is he still being rostered? But yeah, I think Kevin Huerter's actually surpassed him. He's playing tremendously, surprisingly, in my opinion. But Harrison Barnes, he's just not really giving you that output. So that's a wasted roster spot. So drop him straight away. GG Jackson, yeah, I was really hot on him. I saw a couple of games. I thought I had seen enough. But then he's just not getting the playing time, which is really disappointing. Jaren Jackson Jr. came back. He was dominating usage, dominating minutes. But keep an eye on GG Jackson because it's coming into silly season for some of these guys or some of these teams that just are not contending and have a lot of injuries. I think he's one to monitor for the rest of the season. But for right now, he is a drop, unfortunately. Sadiq Bey, he took a dump on your field goal percentage for those playing categories overnight, which is great because my opponent had him. So he single-handedly won me that category. But yeah, I think shot 0 from 12 from the field. So that's horrific. And he wasn't giving you enough outside of that as well. So I think he's a drop. What do you think, Kayla?
I would agree. That last week was abysmal.
Abysmal.
Oh my
Abysmal.
God. Yeah. He'll probably turn it around pretty soon, but
he may turn it around. But keep in mind that DeAndre Hunter is due back very soon as well. So I think that'll take away some playing time for him. So yeah, he's a drop from standard leagues. Spoke about him, Dylan Brooks, lovely Canadian, but I don't think he needs to be rostered. He's a nice streamer, but he doesn't have to be a must roster player.
Yeah, he's receiving a lot of minutes, but he's just not doing much with them.
Yeah. He may heat up, but at this stage, there's just other guys on that team that are getting the usage over him. But keep an eye on him. But he's a nice streamer at this stage, but that's about it. Keontae George, he was one that we probably had on this drop list several weeks ago, and he hasn't really taken that back. Utah's actually playing pretty well. Surprisingly, quite a good brand of basketball right now. But Keontae George isn't part of that at this stage. They're doing really well with Colin Sexton, even Chris Dunn, Jordan Clarkson, and Keontae George seems to be the odd man out at this stage.
Yeah, he's just not receiving a lot of minutes, and there's not much you can do about that in that time.
Yeah, I think he's a clear drop. Kelly Oubre, again, he was taking advantage of some injury. So when Joel Embiid was out, D'Anthony Melton, who was still out, but he was taking some advantage just of the fact that there were a couple of absences. Since then, Embiid has returned to the lineup. Melton is a little bit away from returning, but I still think Kelly Oubre doesn't have to be held.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that someone's going to rush to pick him up off the waivers, especially when you look at that game log. He was starting to do a little bit better, like you said, as a result of those injuries, but he's kind of just fallen back down again.
Yeah. We'll just race through some of these ones, but Killian Hayes not getting the playing time, so he's a drop. PJ Washington not taking advantage of the injuries to Mark Williams and to Nick Richards. He started at center, didn't take advantage, so I think he's a drop. And once the team is fully healthy, I don't think he needs to be considered, probably even for 14 teamers at this stage. But yeah, you can drop him from standard leagues. Trey Murphy, now this is a tough one. He's still providing decent value, but he's just not getting great opportunity at this stage. And perhaps we're comparing the output to that of last season when there are a lot more injuries to Zion, to Ingram, and he just had the more playing time. And also the fact that he's coming back from an injury himself. So he's not providing you the output that some people had expected.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people were expecting the same thing as last season, which is obviously not the case with the majority of the Pelicans staying relatively healthy. I think you can safely drop him.
Yeah, and you're seeing just a few more Pelicans as well, sort of not coming out of the woodwork, but some of these younger guys are playing really, really well. But just another guy to probably drop as well as Herb Jones on the same team as well. Just there's a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of good shooters, some nice defenders on that team, very deep, and that's impacting the output of Herb Jones and Trey Murphy.
Yep, definitely agree with you there.
Zach Collins, now it's looking like that he will play backup minutes to Wemby, and he will start when Wemby does sit on those back-to-backs, and there's going to be a few back-to-backs down the stretch. But I don't think he's a must-roster guy. I think he's a nice stream and plug him in when Wemby's not playing. I just don't think playing a backup role to Wemby, he's not playing alongside of him like he was at the start of the season. I don't think he's a must-roster.
Yeah, especially if he's in that new role now. I don't think he's necessarily worth it, especially if there's a better option on the waiver wire right now.
Yeah, he's okay to have. I just don't think he's necessarily going to give you the output to really spur your team to victory each week. But yeah, I think he can be dropped.
More of a deeper league option.
Deeper league option, absolutely. Benedict Mathurin, he had a bit of a nice couple of weeks whilst a few guys were out injured. I don't think he's got the game, the fantasy game to keep him afloat as well. Now that guys have come in, Pascal Siakam's come in, there's just more mouths to feed again, and his efficiency is letting you down right now.
He's very hot and cold, and right now he's just cold.
Yeah, safe to drop there. Dennis Schroeder. Now, this is a little bit controversial just because of the fact that he started the season like a house on fire. But since the trade, he's been an afterthought. He has barely played 30 minutes recently. I think he's just not getting the output that you'd prefer. And I know that Manuel quickly is the preferred option now at point guard.
Yeah, his role has really changed, and I think he even voiced his unhappiness with that too, which is not good. I think that if you're in a deeper league, you could probably hold on to them, but I don't consider him really a must roster in most standard leagues. That said, though, I feel like with the name and what people were seeing from him early on in the season, I feel like some people would probably pick him up off the waivers if you were to drop him.
Yeah, and we saw him in this six-man role even at the Thunder, and he was okay. He was fine. He was close to a top 100 player, but I don't think he has to be rostered. And even comparing now to back at his Thunder days, at his real peak as a six-man, I don't think he's anywhere near that point at this stage. Onyeka Okongwu, he's one of my favorites, so I've got a big question mark. Perhaps this is more for points leagues. Would you be dropping him from a 12-teamer, Kayla?
I probably would, but this is actually something that I talked about on Josh Lloyd's show. Someone asked who would be a stash considering the trade deadline is coming up, and this is someone who I mentioned just because Clint Capella is on the block right now. So it's hard if you're trying to win a week, drop him. But if you want that long term, I would say stick with him a little bit longer.
So, yeah, good point. It could be situational. If you're doing really well in your standings, if you're close to the top and you can afford a couple of quiet weeks up until trade deadline, he could be a hold in points leagues. In category leagues, I think you have to hold him anyway. He's providing close to top 100 value as it is, and in the limited time, he's splitting those minutes with Capella. Sometimes he's playing a lot more than Capella, which is promising as well. So, yeah, Capella is on the trade block like most of the Hawks. They do need to make a few moves because it's just not working for them right now. Okongwu, I think he's going to be a big winner if Capella does happen to leave. But at this stage, he's a hold in categories and possible drop in points. But yeah, again, situational. Now, the last three are all injured, and they could be drops depending on your situation with IR. In your league, if you don't have IR or if it's not free to stash these guys, I wouldn't bother with Shaden Sharp, firstly. Ivica Zubac, the timeline is probably not conducive to a hold at this stage. He was fine. He was fine to hold. He was a nice rebounder, good source of rebounds, good source of field goal percentage. I just don't think with the timeline that's been presented, he has to be held if you don't have a free IR slot. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I think it was about a month that he's out for. Is that right?
Yeah, you're right. And finally, a little bit longer than a month, Desmond Bane. What do you think? If you don't have an IR, are you holding him?
So I'm playing in a Yahoo league, so I do have that IL spot. I have him stored there, even though all the reports are saying that he's probably not going to play again this season. But just because I have that space, I might as well just hold on to him. If you don't, probably a drop.
Probably a drop, yeah. Yeah, like you said, if you have an IR or IL, yeah, you may as well hold on to him. But it's a hard hold if you don't have that slot because you are competing in daily changes leagues. You're competing against guys that are streaming and they're really racking up the scores whilst you've got just a wasted roster spot here. And even if he does come back, it's going to take some time to ramp up and he'll miss back-to-backs and they're not playing for anything this season apart from perhaps playing for some draft picks as well. So if he does come back healthy, they're not going to be forcing him to play high and heavy minutes. So I think he's probably a drop if you don't have IR. All right.
Some injuries
Speaking
now.
of injuries, do you want to take us through some of this, Kayla?
I'll do the schedule. You're the injury guy.
All right, let's do injuries.
Let's
do it. All right, we spoke about Zach LaVine. So 1 to 2 weeks, I think, at this stage. But again, does that mean he perhaps has played his last game for the Bulls? Let's wait and see on that one because trade deadline is just around the corner. It's not long past that. So could have been his last game for the Bulls. We'll wait and see. But I've got Memphis next to his name. That's a clear typo. But yeah, for the Bulls, we'll see what happens with that. But like we said, there's going to be more usage for Kobe White, a lot more opportunities and playing time for guys like Patrick Williams and for Alex Caruso. So yeah, let's see what happens there. Ivica Zubac, we spoke about him about a month. So I would be dropping if you don't have IR. And Isaiah Hartenstein. So this happened overnight. He left the game early, as we said. Precious Achua picked up some of those minutes, but he's got some ankle soreness. Let's wait and see what happens with the prognosis there. I'm hoping that it will be a real short-term injury. Perhaps he's just going to miss the one game, but let's cross our fingers because he's been outstanding. He's been one of our best pickups for the season.
Mhm.
Let's hope that this continues on and it's not anything else more sinister. So let's keep an eye on that. I haven't heard any other updates recently, so I'll be waiting for that one. I believe, Kayla, correct me if I'm wrong, the next game is on Tuesday. So we've got some
Yep.
time just to see what happens there.
Yeah, it is next Tuesday, so there's about 2-3 days for him to rest. Hopefully, he will be back. I didn't actually see the injury, so I don't know how bad it was just by looking at it, but we should have an update pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit innocuous. I think he just came out with soreness. I haven't seen an incident, if there was
Yeah.
an incident, or maybe he just came out with some soreness. So let's hope that it's nothing too sinister. Now, just some updates on some guys that have been previously injured. So Franz Wagner is actually questionable for the next game, which is fantastic. Great to get him back into your lineup. So watch for those updates. Jaime Hackers, he should be back within a week, but we spoke about this on our last show. Jaime Hackers has come out of the lineup. Jimmy Butler's come into the lineup, looked really nice in that team. Jaime Hackers is going to lose some playing time a little bit, and a lot of people are saying he's still going to be able to sustain some 12-team value moving forward. What do you think of Jaime?
I want to hold him. I'm very promising with his production. Like you said, there is that question of how he'll fit alongside with Jimmy Butler now that he's doing really well and how his minutes will be impacted. If you have that IL spot, hold him there. But then again, if you drop him, I don't think he's going to be someone who people rush to go and pick up.
Yeah, let's see what happens there. But yeah, hopefully he's back in the next couple of games. Same goes for Cade Cunningham, which is going to change things up for Detroit, as we spoke about earlier. So hopefully within the next week with his knee strain. Jakob Poeltl, similar timeline with his ankle sprain. DeAndre Hunter, it seems like he's been about a week for the last 5 weeks, but still some knee soreness, but he should be back anytime soon. Like we said, Sadiq Bey can be dropped from that point on. Darius Garland, this is very exciting for those that have held on, but he's been out for several weeks. I'm hoping it'll be less than a week, but hopefully around that week mark, and then he'll be back, which will be great news for the Cavs. Gordon Hayward, we spoke about him. Again, he's old, but I'm still hoping that he'll come back from his calf strain in about a week's time, which will then have that impact on Brandon Miller. But again, do the Hornets need to play Hayward? Probably not. They probably will, but I don't think they need to. So we'll see how that all plays out with the rotations as well. Ben Simmons, we spoke about him, back nerve impingement. There's just been some talk that he's been ramping up, slowly ramping up. But again, that timeline of 1 to 2 weeks is a bit of an estimate at this stage, but let's look for some more concrete timelines moving forward. Chris Paul, just based on the initial timeline, there's probably around 2 weeks left of his fractured hand injury. So hopefully that will be able to help out the Warriors because they are struggling a little bit without their full complement of stars. Shaden Sharp, we said that he's around 2 to 3 weeks with his adductor soreness. He doesn't need to be held unless you have an IR, but even when he does come back, he wasn't providing tremendous value from a category league perspective anyway. But we did see at the back end of last season, he sort of dominated because just there were no one else left to play. But I don't think he's going to have that luxury moving forward this season. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's someone that I dropped a while ago too, even before he was injured. He was playing really well for a stretch, and then he kind of just went cold and then injured.
Yeah. I think he's a safe drop at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
Evan Mobley, this is exciting, but he's still around a month from returning. But yeah, it's coming down. His knee soreness is hopefully subsiding as well. So that'll be great. Cleveland have still played well. And when he does come back, that's going to obviously take a hit to someone like a Jarrett Allen, who's just been on an absolute tear. We've spoken about him several times in the last few weeks about sell highs. When it gets to around 1 or 2 weeks away, perhaps even now, you might want to look at selling high on Jarrett Allen because Evan Mobley's return will definitely impact that. Desmond Bane, yeah, like we said, just the 2-month timeline. I don't want to hold him. If you don't have that IR, I think holding him could be fraught with danger. It's going to cost you a few wins down the stretch as well. And finally, Mark Williams, we just don't know. He's had a couple of setbacks in his recovery. Last time we spoke, Kayla, it looked like he'd be back in about a week's time. That's now looking more like probably at least a month, perhaps even 2 months. We don't know what's going to happen again with Hornets and their subpar reporting of injuries. And I'll say subpar kindly. It's terrible. It's ridiculous. You just don't know what's happening. We don't know if he's actually going to play again this season. I don't want to be too dramatic, but we just don't know. It could be a week or it could be the rest of the season. It would be nice to get some solid timelines moving forward.
Yeah, so far all I'm seeing is just week to week, which isn't really promising. But yeah,
It's not the best sign, is it?
exactly. I don't think it's entirely unlikely that he doesn't play again.
Yeah, there's not much to play for, like I was saying, just
Exactly.
with the Hornets. But it would be nice just to see them as a nice, cohesive team. They've got some nice young talent. It's just hard to keep them on the court at the same time. Schedule. All right,
Yeah.
Kayla, your forte.
All right, getting into it for this week, the good news is that there's no teams that play just 1 or 2 games. So we have a pretty hefty schedule, which is going to be great for us to watch and for fantasy, of course. The majority of the league is going to be playing 18 teams will be playing 3 games. I won't name all of them for the sake of time, but we also have a couple of teams playing 4. And we also have some notable back-to-backs to watch out for. You can see them all here. Take some time to pause the video. Let's get on to the mailbag segment because we're reaching almost an hour.
Absolutely. First one from our mate, Adam King.
Yes.
Jeremy Sohan has been a top 60 player over the past 2 weeks. Do we think he sticks as a top 100 guy rest of season? Kayla?
I think the short answer is that if he's continuing to be utilized properly, yes. But it also depends on what really happens with the Spurs being out of playoff contention and how those minutes go.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any risk of him sitting like Wemby is at the moment. I think they really want to play him a lot of minutes as well. So I think he can be a top 100 guy. Some of those shooting splits were really high. I don't know if they're unsustainable. Maybe he's found his shot. Some of it may be a little bit unsustainable, but I think top 100 is not out of reach for him.
Definitely.
Next one from Latrell. You think it's too early to pick up Marvin Bagley? Now, no, I don't think it's too early. It's probably too late, to be honest. I think he's being picked up everywhere, and that's just because of the last 2 games. He's looked really impressive. Like we said, though, just be mindful that Daniel Gafford returning will impact Marvin Bagley's output. But like we were saying, there's a chance that he'll split some minutes as well, perhaps playing 24 minutes each. You would like to think it won't be like that, but if Marvin Bagley does get upwards of 20 minutes, I think he's worth considering in standard leagues.
Yeah, I think so. And I have a feeling that a lot of people will probably drop him as soon as they see that his production dips a little bit. So that even will give you an opportunity to pick him up later when he does have that starting role.
Yeah, and look, there's even at the start of the season, there were a lot of rumors around what are the Wizards going to do if things don't go well, and it's turned out that way. Are they going to blow it all up? And perhaps a beneficiary could be someone like Marvin Bagley. But again, you don't want to just sit on someone just for the fact that it could happen at trade deadline, but we'll wait and see. Next one from Andre Mariano. Who's got better rest of season value, Markelle Fultz or Jeremy Sohan?
Sohan, hands down. With Fultz, I've mentioned this a lot before on our podcast, but I'm very questionable about him and his ability to stay healthy, even the minutes restrictions that he's been facing. I feel like Sohan, I feel like he's here to stay now. I have a good feeling.
Yeah, and I know Kingy was massive on Fultz, and I think he still is, still big on Fultz. But like you said, I think he's going to not play humongous minutes, and he may skip some back-to-backs as well. But he has looked a little bit better in recent games. He had a bit of a stinker in the last one, which so happened I happened to stream him in, so I felt that pain. But I think Jeremy Sohan, he's taken it to the next level now that he's moved away from that point guard position. So, yeah, Sohan for me as well. Next one from Ryan Porteous. So this is a trade question. So this is a points league. So Kayla, let's listen to this one. So he was offered Jokic for his Dame and DeJounte Murray. If he did this, he'd be able to keep 2 of Wendell Carter Jr., Buddy Hield, or Xavier Tillman. Which side would you take?
So as soon
Jokic for Dame or DeJounte?
Yeah, as soon as I saw that you were being offered Jokic, automatically take him. With Dame, we've obviously seen a little bit of a dip in his production this year now that he's with the Bucks. And even with DeJounte Murray, he's not really my favorite player for fantasy. And like you said, there is that possibility that he does get traded to the Lakers. I think no matter where he is, he's just not my preference for fantasy. So I would definitely take that trade. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd take Jokic. I'm
Yeah.
assuming this is a standard league. I think it is a standard league from memory, which is a 12-teamer. So I'd be taking
Mhm.
Jokic. You would, and I say this to a lot of people when I answer questions on Twitter, you would consider getting that depth if it is a deep league. But in a standard league or shallower, you take the better player and then you just top
Yeah.
up with the plethora of options on the waiver wire, as we've just discussed. So yeah, Jokic side for me. Next one. Do we drop TJ McConnell, Larry Nance, or Torian Prince for Cam Whitmore?
Out of all these names, TJ McConnell is the first one that I would drop just because we kind of talked about this before that Halliburton is back. Then again, you did mention that he was questionable for tonight's game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would monitor that situation, but TJ would be probably my number one. Even Prince, you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, I'd be the same. I'd be happy to drop TJ McConnell or Torian Prince for Cam Whitmore. It sounds like it could possibly be a 14-teamer, but no other
Yeah.
description there. But yeah, I would be fine with dropping TJ or Torian Prince there. Larry Nance, he's fine. He's okay to having a 12-teamer. He's probably more for a 14-teamer, but I would still prefer Nance over TJ and Prince right now.
Mhm.
This is from Brian Chang. So, hey, Kayla and myself. He's in an ESPN 12-team head-to-head points league. Firstly, how bad is Isaiah Hartenstein's injury? So we spoke about this. We don't have the up-to-date news on his injury, so we don't know how long he's going to be out, if at all. It's just looking like soreness, but soreness could develop into something a little bit more serious. So we can't really answer that at this stage. So we'll give you, as soon as we find out, we'll let everyone know. But I'm hoping that he'll be back very shortly. But yeah, we just don't know. We just do not know with big men as well. So we'll wait and see on that one. He's been an absolute stud this year. Absolutely agree.
Mhm.
Next part of that question. Also, when do you think Jakob Poeltl will be back from injury?
I think you said about a week. It really depends, though, with these kind of things, right?
Yeah, I think the timeline is around a week. So someone like a Jonte Porter, who else? Thad Young, and they've been playing a little bit of who else? Jonte
Chris
Porter,
Boucher as well,
Thad
I
Young,
think.
Chris Boucher, of course,
Yep.
Chris Boucher. They'll lose a lot of value once Jakob Poeltl does return to that lineup. But yeah, they've been okay. Yeah, no one has really stood out. Jonte Porter has come in and out of some of my streaming as well. But yeah, it'll be nice to have Jakob Poeltl back. And hopefully, yeah, within a week.
Mhm.
That's it
That is
from
all.
our mailbag. All right, Kayla.
All right. Any
Any
final
final
thoughts?
thoughts?
I was just about to ask you.
There we go.
For me, the biggest right now is the Grizzlies. It's going to be very interesting to see just how everything works out, how JJJ continues to perform, what other players step up, even Jackson too, kind of see what happens with the minutes there, and if he can live up to that hype. What do you think?
Yeah, it'll be interesting viewing. We've given out a lot of ads for the upcoming week as well, and things can change very quickly, particularly as trade deadline comes about. So just keep in mind some final thoughts when we do approach trade deadline. We'll speak about this in next week's show as well, but when we approach trade deadline, keep roster moves available. So know who your worst player on your roster is, because you may need to drop them very quickly to pick someone up very fast off the waiver wire as well, depending on what trades go down as well. But yeah, we'll speak about that in more detail in future weeks, but who knows? A trade could happen any minute now, but more likely it'll be closer to trade deadline. So yeah, keep that in mind as well. But yeah, know who your worst player is, and that's just a tip for new players out there.
Very good
All right,
advice.
Carla. Give us your Twitter handle for those that aren't familiar already.
Yeah, you can find me at Kayla_Fonte.
And do you have any more upcoming shows coming out?
At the moment, no. See, I'm back in school now for my last semester, so I'm a little bit busy. But
Right.
hey, if there's more shows that come up, I'm honored to be on them.
Yeah, don't forget your roots between two hoops.
Oh, never. That's my number one.
Oh, that's good to hear. Good to hear. Thank you, guys. And thank you, Kayla.
Thank you.
Until next time, have a good one.
Bye,
See you
guys.
guys.